Hello again, my dear friends. It's so very comforting to have you back here with us tonight. You are so very welcome. There are some things in this world that cannot be hurried or measured by a ticking clock. They happen along in their own sweet time, appearing like a sudden patch of blue sky through the clouds, reminding us that the best things in life are often the ones we simply wait for with a patient heart. And that was what I was thinking when I wrote tonight's story, The Cart That Comes Only Sometimes. Go ahead and take a slow, deep, settling breath in, letting your chest expand fully, and then let it out with a long, peaceful sigh. Feel the quiet stillness of the evening settle over your limbs, pressing you down gently into the soft embrace of your mattress. The day is behind you now, and all its small, busy work is done. Tonight, there is nothing left to do but let your thoughts drift and listen to the quiet music of the valley. Tonight we're going to join Rosco and his friends on a morning when the ordinary lanes of the village are touched by a little bit of unexpected magic. The arrival of a rare visitor who brings small treasures from far-off places. So nestle down into the absolute center of your bed. Pull your blankets up nice and cozy to your chinnigan. Let your eyes grow heavy and peaceful. And let's step out into the gentle light of the valley. The morning was wrapped in a quiet, pearly mist that clung to the thatch of the cottage roof and turned the cobwebs in the lavender bushes into delicate strings of glass beads. It was the kind of morning that felt entirely secret, as if the village were the only place in the whole wide world. Inside the cottage, the copper kettle was already singing its low, familiar tune on the cast-iron stove, filling the room with the sweet, clean scent of wild mint. Berry, Caratina, and Millie Moonbeam sat at the table, their bare toe beans soaking up the deep, radiant warmth of the sun-baked floorboards. They sipped their morning tea through their curly straws, the steam feathering softly through their whiskers as they watched the fog begin to lift from the lane. Suddenly, a sound drifted through the open window, a faint, rhythmic creak-clack, creak-clack, accompanied by the soft, occasional chime of a tiny brass bell. Rosco paused, his teacup held halfway to his nose. He smoothed his coat, a look of quiet wonder coming over his face. "Listen," he said softly. "The bell. It's the cart." The bunnies' noses twitched with instant, joyful recognition. It was the cart that comes only sometimes. No one in the valley knew exactly when the travelling trader would arrive. He didn't follow the turning of the calendar or the changing of the market days. He simply appeared when the wind was right, his old wooden wagon rolling out of the high mist like a dream. Caratina reached for their willow basket, and they moseyed out into the lane, their footsteps puffing up tiny, silent clouds of powdery dust. There, coming around the mossy bend of the stone wall, was the cart. It was a beautiful weathered vehicle, its sides painted a faded robin's egg blue that had been softened by years of sun and rain. It was pulled by an elderly shaggy pony named Clover, whose ears flapped in time with his slow, unhurried steps. The cart was entirely covered in tiny secret drawers, small wooden shelves and copper hooks, all hidden beneath a canopy of patched canvas that smelled of old canvas oil and wood smoke. Walking beside Clover was the trader himself, an old bespectacled hare named Quigly Barrow. He didn't call out or make a fuss to gather a crowd. He simply gave his little brass bell a tinkle and doffed his felt cap, his eyes crinkling into a warm smile as he brought the cart to a gentle halt beneath the shade of the village willow. "Good morning, little friends," Quigly Barrow said, his voice as soft and comforting as the rustle of dry autumn leaves. "The roads have been long, but the wind told me it was time to visit the valley once more." Quigly Barrow was a tall, slender hare. He wore a long, faded, plum-coloured coat with deep pockets, and his exceptionally long ears were tipped with velvet black. He had long, whiskerful whiskers either side of his nose, and a pair of kind, soulful eyes that looked as though they had seen every road far and wide. As the bunnies approached, Quigly Barrow stepped down from the wooden bench of the cart with a light, graceful leap. He smoothed his long waistcoat and adjusted a small brass pocket watch. "Ah, the valley bunnies," Quigly said, his voice carrying the soft, rhythmic cadence of a seasoned traveller. "I've carried the dust of 3 shires on my boots this week, but the air here always smells the sweetest." He paused, his ears dipping in a polite bow as he offered them a gentle smile. "The roads may wind and the hills may rise, but the prettiest valley is before my eyes." Berry, Caratina, and Millie Moonbeam smiled, their noses twitching with delight at the familiar music of his speech. With long, elegant fingers, Quigly turned to the side of his faded blue wagon. He pressed a small hidden catch, and a row of tiny polished cedar drawers slid outward with a soft click. Inside the velvet-lined compartments lay a collection of the most curious, humble little objects. There were no bright gems or heavy gold, only small, quiet treasures that felt deeply comforting to look at. He reached into the first drawer and brought out a tiny hand-carved wooden thimble, its surface worn incredibly smooth and dark by time. This belonged to an old field mouse who lived in the hedgerows of Appleby, Quigly whispered, holding it up so the sun caught the delicate grain of the wood. She used it for 40 years to stitch the winter cloaks of her grandchildren, using nothing but thistledown and fine spider silk. It is said that any coat stitched with this thimble will always keep the wearer safe from the frost. He cradled it in his paw before settling it gently onto the velvet cloth. A stitch of love in the autumn grey will keep the chill of the world away. Millie Moonbeam leaned in closer, her whiskers aflutter as she gazed at the tiny wooden thimble, imagining the cosy mouse hole where it had spent so many winters. Quigly then reached for a small round tin box. When he pried the lid open with a soft pop, the air was instantly filled with the sharp, deeply nostalgic scent of sea salt and dried gorse blossoms. Inside lay 3 perfectly flat, striped pebbles, grey and milk white, polished by the rhythm of the tide. "From the western coast," Quigly murmured, his eyes looking distant, "where the grey gulls nest and the waves sing a lullaby to the cliffs. A fisherman gave them to me because they hold the memory of the sun on the water, even on the darkest night." Quigly Barrow closed the small tin of sea pebbles with a gentle click, the nostalgic scent of salt and gorse blossoms lingering in the warm shade of the willow tree. He looked down at the bunnies, his long ears tilting forward with patient, unhurried curiosity. "Every object has its journey," Quigly said softly, resting his long paws on the edge of the blue cart. "But a wagon cannot carry more than its axles can bear. To take a new treasure onto the road, an old one must find a home where it is loved." He gave a slow, graceful nod. "A trade is made not with silver or gold, but with simple things that the heart can hold." Rosco stepped forward, reaching into their sturdy willow basket. He brought out a small earthenware jar, sealed with a thick disc of cork, the very jar of raw clover honey that Mr. Bramblewick had given them from the harvest just days before. The clay of the jar was cool and smooth, bearing the faint, sweet perfume of the hive. "We don't have rare things from the coast, Quigly," Rosco said, "but we have the sweetness of our own valley. This is summer clover honey, gathered by the bees when the sun was at its highest." Quigly took the jar in his long, elegant fingers. He pulled the cork with a soft pop and inhaled deeply, his soulful eyes crinkling with pure contentment. He could smell the warm July afternoons, the damp river moss by the willow grove, and the quiet care of the old village. "Ah," Quigly murmured, replacing the cork with a satisfying tap. "This is the very essence of peace. A spoonful of this in winter will bring the sunshine back to any cold road. The bees' long work in the blossom sweet is the finest gift that a traveller can meet." He placed the jar carefully into a specially padded compartment near his seat, ensuring it was safe for the long lanes ahead. Then he turned back to the cedar drawers, gesturing to the tiny treasures within. The thimble of the field mouse, or perhaps the sea pebbles. Choose what speaks to your cottage tonight, little friends. Caratina looked at Berry and Millie Moonbeam, their noses twitching in silent agreement. It was Millie Moonbeam who pointed a small paw toward the tiny hand-carved wooden thimble. She thought of their cosy kitchen, and how lovely it would be to have that little token of old, protective love sitting on the mantelpiece by the cast-iron stove. Quigly lifted the thimble with a reverent grace and placed it directly into Caratina's open palm. It felt incredibly light, yet its smooth, dark wood held a deep, comforting warmth. With the little wooden thimble tucked safely into the velvet lining of their willow basket, the bunnies offered Quigly a quiet, respectful bow of their heads. Quigly Barrow climbed back onto the wooden seat of his robin's egg blue wagon. He picked up the leather reins with a practiced, gentle hand and gave a soft whistle to the shaggy pony. Clover flicked his ears, the tiny brass bell on his harness giving one last musical chime that echoed down the lane. "Farewell, little keepers of the valley," Quigly called out as the cart began to roll forward, its wooden wheels making a slow, comforting creak-clack against the earth. He looked back over his shoulder, his long coat fluttering slightly in the breeze. The wheel must turn and the traveller must roam, but a gentle heart is always at home. The bunnies stood beneath the shade of the old willow, watching as the blue cart wended its way around the far bend of the stone wall, gradually disappearing into the soft golden light of the late afternoon. The lane grew entirely still once more, leaving behind only the faint, nostalgic scent of wood smoke and canvas oil in the air. They walked back to their village cottage, their pace unhurried and peaceful. Inside, the sun was casting long, amber slants across the wooden timber floors, and the kitchen felt wonderfully safe and secure. Rosco took the tiny hand-carved thimble from the basket. With great care he placed it right in the centre of the mantelpiece, right next to the brass clock that ticked its slow rhythmic song. The smooth, dark wood caught the light of the dying sun, looking perfectly at home alongside the old pottery jars and the bundle of dried lavender. Millie Moonbeam pulled a low wooden stool up to the hearth, her eyes fixed on the little treasure. She felt a deep, warming comfort, knowing that the small story of the Appleby field mouse had found a resting place right here in their own quiet cottage. As the twilight deepened into a soft, velvety blue, Rosco built up a small, lazy fire in the cast-iron stove. The dry birch logs crackled with a gentle, friendly pop, throwing a warm, dancing glow across the room. They enjoyed a simple evening supper of sweet baked pears and warm milk, sipping slowly through their curly straws as the night settled over the village. When it was time for sleep, the bunnies climbed into their soft feather beds, pulling the plumptiously thick wool blankets right up to their chinnigans. Caratina let her long ears rest across the cool linen pillow, her nose giving one final sleepy twitch as she listened to the rhythmic tick of the clock. Outside, the stars began to blink awake over the high ridge, watching over a valley that was entirely at peace. The traveller was on his road. The honey was safe in its jar, and the little thimble kept its quiet watch by the hearth. All was snug. All was well. Night-night.